There's only a handful of key players that have consistently been leaders in the food, but also because of your love of Melbourne and what you can contribute.
And that's I think the art form in a brand is to be able to tell that story in an instant.
When you're talking about the brand from your point of view, you're not talking about a width of brand, you're talking about a depth of brand.
Correct, 100%.
Do I have an interior designer come in and do amazing decor? Do I do the kitchen first? The menu? What would your advice be to somebody that wants to do what you've done?
When it comes down to putting together the brand that you want to push forward with, the concept is one of the most important things. Mamma mia!
Yeah, in a very simple terms, powered by Grossi type of situation where you take the lower... you like that idea? Yeah.
I'm loving the way you're describing it. That's what's making me laugh, because I don't think I could have articulated anywhere near as good as you, Richard.
Welcome back to BRANDR, and today, rather a special guest. Can I say an icon of the food and beverage and hospitality industry in Melbourne, Guy Grossi. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Roy and Richard. It's well, I must say it's actually an honour to be here with you. When Richard first asked me to come on the show, I thought to myself, well, why wouldn't I take that opportunity?
Well, thanks for joining us, and get right down to it. The brand that you're probably most famous for, you've done many brands, and you'll talk more about those, is Florentino's.
Yes, it is. It is.
Tell us all about the journey. You've been involved with that for 26 years. How did it all start? How did you transform the brand to, I guess, the Grossi way? And how did you make it so famous?
Well, it already had a bit of notoriety about the brand Florentino, because it's been around, as you say, for a long time. It first opened in 1928. And at the time that we purchased it, our family, we heard a rumour that Lorraine Podgonick, the then owner, was interested in selling. So I approached her. She'd had the restaurant for about 10 years. And she said, well, I'm not quite ready just now, but when I am, I'll give you a call. And she was true to her word, and she did. Now, we felt as a family that the fit was just so right, because the Grossi family's been cooking in Australia since 1960, when my father first came to Melbourne. And I followed in his footsteps. And so the brand has been building for many, many years, but we felt that iconic Florentino that started with the Italians way back in 1928 was a fantastic fit to bring our Grossi culture into. And so and also there was a bit of a family connection there, because when Dad first came out here, he worked at Mario's around the corner. It was on the corner of Exhibition and Little Burke Street. And one of the first places they took my father was in the iconic cellar bar for a little break during the day. So there was a bit of a family connection there. And we always had a really good rapport with the Massonis. And my father worked for Leon Massoni, and I worked for Leon Massoni. And of course, it was the famous Ronaldo Massoni that first opened the Florentino. But the Massoni family had a great legacy of Italian food and that whole storytelling. And if you look at the mural room, you'll see the beautiful murals that Ronaldo Massoni had commissioned by the famous artist Napier Waller, depicting the life of, life in Florence during the Renaissance period and so forth. So even then you could see that there was that was in their minds. They were creating an ambience, creating an atmosphere, which is all part of creating that brand.
And remembering at the time, Guy, that earlier period, we were very much an Anglo-Saxon type of environment, right? I mean, the idea of buying wine and having pasta and a cappuccino and things was foreign to a lot of people in those early years. The other thing I was sort of very interested in is, how do you take that history, which you're immersed in, also because you're Italian, how do you take that history with all that background, all that sort of responsibility of history, and then make it your own? I think that's a very, I think people listening to this in terms of buying businesses or transforming their businesses, how do you take history and make it relevant?
Well, I think there's a sensitivity and respect to the history. And just on a note about where we were as a community, as a society, take the name Florentino for a moment. it's not an Italian word and it's not an English word. It's actually a mix of two different words. So if it was Italian, it would be Fiorentino, and if it was in English, it would be the Florentine. But it's actually Florentino. So an Italian-sounding word that, you know, people can easily say, which speaks volumes of the time.
Isn't that interesting about a word, a name? You know, they're just the letters of that, and the fact that you finish off with an O, which phonetically is very strong, so you've got that memory. It's, again, just in terms of subtle branding, if you analyse it, it's very, very critical and puts value into the name.
Absolutely, and that's why I make mention of it. Now, going back to your question, I think when you're taking over a place with such a long history, and remembering we're a family with a really long history of food and cooking and beverage and just basically looking after people and serving people, there needs to be a big sense of responsibility and sensibility to the history that's already there. Now, we learned this very, very quickly in the piece because a lot of the customers that were there at the time when we took over, especially down in the cellar bar, people come in there virtually, like we've got clients that come in there or guests that come in every day, and they actually feel like they're part of the ownership of that place. So whatever you're doing to change and to sort of edge towards your own taste and your own presentation as what you would like the public to see as your place, you need to be very careful to bring these people along on that journey, because the last thing you want to do is alienate them and have them turn against you, because they're your guests.
But this is a critical thing there, is the orchestration of retaining heritage but being relevant.
Correct.
That's an art form in its own right, because at the end of the day, Guy, you're really, in black and white terms, only as good as the last service that you provide.
Absolutely. And that's why we concentrated, when we first got there, we had a 3-day turnaround, and the concentration was on cleaning the place, making it beautiful, making it as presentable as possible. But the biggest changes we made were to the menu from a food point of view. We brought it back to the essence of being a very authentic Italian restaurant again, which I think it had kind of drifted away from that. And there were bits of French in there. And we've kept the chocolate souffle, so, forgive us for that, but we couldn't take that off the menu. But we actually brought the authenticity back. We added wines to the list so that we had a more complete wine list again. And we sort of brought it back to that authentic Italian style restaurant that you'd find in Italy, without kind of changing everything too much too quickly. And then as the years went on, there was evolution. So eventually we couldn't fix the chairs any longer from the 1928 because they were falling apart on us. So we introduced new chairs. Now, we didn't go for something that was oldie worldy, because I think that is where you start to become irrelevant if you're trying to replicate something from another era. So we chose a chair that was luxurious. This is for the upstairs Florentino. Was luxurious enough, but probably a bit more modern, which creates a bit of a juxtaposition in the restaurant up there. But again, drags it into a relevant time period, but still the murals are on the wall that represent,
and no jacket and tie required upstairs.
Well, we let that rule go a little bit because we wanted, again, to be more relevant in the marketplace of today. So you can get, people dressed in amazing designer T-shirts coming up there, and they feel like they look fantastic. And you do get some, rock and roll stars that come up there, and they don't necessarily want to wear a jacket and tie, or a shirt and tie and a jacket, but their clothing are very presentable anyway, like they still look good. So this is another area where you just become a bit more relevant to today's market.
Can I just delve into a bit more the brand of the family? Because what I find really interesting in your narrative, talking to you beforehand, that you talk about being a custodian. So this was a gem of an asset, let's say, from way back. Your family's taken it and sort of nurtured it, I guess, and the Grossi name has taken it to a different place. And now you're going to be giving that custodianship to somebody else. What does the Grossi name stand for? We know what Florentino's is. What's the unique proposition behind Grossi?
Well, the Florentino has effectively become one of the Grossi brands over the years. So, and now with the sale, obviously, that's going to change, but the Grossi will remain with us because that's our brand. And to answer that question, we kind of have, a philosophy in our mind, and we've articulated it. And it's something that's more than just a sale of food and beverage. What we have created with our brand is that wonderful Italian cultural experience. That's something that you get in the Italian household. It's something that if you go to a little village in Italy, as we were talking before, you can feel it in spades. And when our parents came out here, again in 1960, then they started to build those layers of culture. And what we're actually selling in our venues, in our restaurants, it isn't food and beverage. I mean, it is. You need that to be able to get people to come and eat there and be your guests. But what we're selling is an experience. And that it might be a dining experience, which is very simple in the cellar bar, a cup of coffee and a plate of crostoli, or it might be a tasting menu upstairs that goes for 3 or 4 hours, and you sit there and you have great wines and all of that sort of stuff. But the actual essence of what we're selling in our brand is that Italian beautiful cultural experience.
Yes, but on that, Guy, it's not just the experience, it's the IP behind that experience that actually knows how to manage that experience, how to articulate it, and how to inspire your staff to deliver that experience. So it's a very layered storytelling in this whole journey of what you've been able to create.
There absolutely is, and that's the I think the art form in a brand is to be able to tell that story in an instant without, and every little aspect, like waiters greeting you with a buonasera, welcoming you, with a benvenuto, the beautiful product placement branding as well, like having a great wine list with beautiful Italian wines and Australian wines, because we're in Australia, so we support local products and all of that. But there has to be that Italianism in everything that we do, and it goes through that filter. If something doesn't fit through that filter, is it something that we want to present because it's beautifully grown and it's local? Then yes, that works. Is it a beautiful product to be a prosciutto di San Daniele? Yes, that works. But are we going to use Asian greens in one of our dishes? No, that doesn't work, because that doesn't speak of our brand. Cima di rape? Yes, that speaks to our brand. I love Asian greens, don't get me wrong, but it just doesn't work for our brand. And I think they're the little things you have to tick when you're building a brand. It's that you're not confusing your people. You're not confusing them with all these different elements that don't work together. Your brand has to be strong. So in our case, it's Italian, so it has to reflect that at every step of the way.
When you're talking about the brand from your point of view, you're not talking about a width of brand, you're talking about a depth of brand.
Correct,
so
100%.
That narrow focus, which everyone knows, and some people might not feel like Italian that week or whatever. So
but they shouldn't come and see us.
No, that's right.
That's right.
Exactly.
I think one of the other things that stands out for me this week, we had Melbourne Cup yesterday. We have the world coming to Melbourne occasionally for big events. And I think that's another part of your success, Guy, if I look at it from a distance, that if people come from New York, London, wherever it is, from around the world, there's only a handful of restaurants in Melbourne that would even be on their little shopping list.
Well, that's very nice of you to say, Roy, and I'd like to think
how did you do that?
Well, I think it's a question of, again, just being true to your brand, making sure that you're delivering a good experience. As Richard mentioned before, you're only as good as your last service. So, we've all had doozies, don't get me wrong, but you've got to make sure you limit those doozies down. You have to make sure you perform every time, and just trying to take the guesswork out of it. So good systems in place for everything, so that you can, it looks like it's just happening by accident, but it's all designed to deliver an experience.
That point that Roy's making, we're talking about the Melbourne Cup and having the cup in your restaurant.
Yes.
That doesn't come just because you cook beautiful food. It comes because you've got to network, you have to know the right people, you have to put the offer up that becomes, you're polishing their brand just as much as you're enhancing your own brand. So behind everything you're doing, subtly, it's all about brand.
Yep, there's a design to it all, and that relationship that we've formed with the VRC over many, many years. We've been doing our own cup viewing dinner for about 25 years as well, where the Melbourne Cup comes to, and we get the lovely likes of Eddie Maguire hosting it. He's done about 3 for us. And they're all relationships which are fostered over many years of goodwill and working together with great Melburnians and great Melbourne institutions like the VRC.
But also being part of a community that you're building
Correct.
the Melbourne brand at the same time. I mean, you're at the MCG as well.
Yes.
I think you're still
Yes.
there, right? So you're there.
Yes.
Someone told me the other day that they saw your cookbook in a Berlin bookshop. Now, when you think of that type of thing, your expressions of being an ambassador for food, but it also comes back to Melbourne, it's pretty remarkable in terms that you've connected your brand with Melbourne. You're supporting Melbourne, but Melbourne's supporting you.
Well, Melbourne has always been our home. I'm a born and bred Melbourne boy. As I said probably 3 times now, my parents came here in 1960, but I grew up in the suburbs of Melbourne, in a family that was very nurturing, very caring. My mum was a fantastic cook, and so was Dad. But we got very well looked after, and we were indoctrinated by our parents about Melbourne being the best place on earth. And we believe it as a family. We really believe it. So the Melbourne story, our story is not just an Italian story. It is very much an Melbourne story. And through what we do, we try and promote Melbourne as much as we possibly can. We've even created a brand of coffee for ourselves called Territory Coffee, Territory Melbourne Coffee. Right. And that's the coffee that we use. It's a blend that's made for us because the promotion of Melbourne is as important to us as the promotion of our Italian culture. And look, they go hand in hand because the Melbourne brand and the Italian brand really work well together. All you have to do is go to somebody's sauce making day in the summertime where they're squashing all the tomatoes, and you'll see a lot of happy people there.
But when you think about Melbourne and the restaurateurs, I'm just thinking about your entrepreneurial status. There's only a handful of key players that have consistently been leaders in the food and reinvented all the time. I mean, there's Chris Lucas who's doing his thing, as you know.
Yep.
There's Con Christopoulos, there's Andrew McConnell, there's Ronnie DeStasio, there's yourself. These are pillars of the Melbourne eating style and continually doing things in an exciting way. So you could say Melbourne really has actually been enhanced and influenced, particularly by entrepreneurs like yourself who put everything on the line to serve an experience, but also because of your love of Melbourne and what you can contribute. I think people forget sometimes that the amount of effort that a restaurateur has to do to actually deliver that experience in sometimes difficult economic times is remarkable.
Yeah, thank you for those kind words. I mean, I appreciate it, and I also am very proud to be in that group because they are great people that have delivered some fantastic hospitality here in Melbourne, and obviously at the same time have promoted the city as one of the great dining capitals of Australia. So when you say, international people coming to Australia and coming to Melbourne, and we have a good reputation even around Australia as a destination for food and beverage. And so to be in that group of people that actually have made a difference, it's a very proud moment for me. So thank you, Richard, for saying that.
Particularly also, we haven't got a very big, per capita, a very big population that actually even can come to these places, your restaurants, because there is a price point. Let's face it. So that continual leveling up high level, I think, is a great credit to people like yourself who have to, as you say before, you've got to be up at 6. You're at the restaurant all day, probably sometimes into the night. You've got trials and tribulations. Things go wrong. You're there, focused. The values have to be maintained. It's a really great, for anyone looking about brand, there's nothing better than looking at a restaurant and the effort that goes into making that experience matter.
I'm just also interested, your strategy now for the family is quite different than when you started, and be great to hear your views on, and you have created many brands other than Florentino. Just talk a bit more about how you work now. You've done the hard yards, right? You've worked your butt off in the kitchen, 26 years of hard slog through, some good times and some bad times. But you've come out of that with a huge body of knowledge. You're now in a different kind of business model, which is really about building brands, sometimes for you, but sometimes for others. Would you like to expand on that a little bit?
Sure. it's been more like 40 years actually, because it's Florentino 26 years, but I've been cooking since I was 15. So it has been a long slog. And just to Richard's point, there is a lot of moving parts in restaurants. Before I move on to your question,
sure.
Roy, there is a lot of moving parts in restaurants, and there's a lot of effort and work that goes into it. But I think you'll find that the real key players, some of the ones you mentioned, are people that have a very big passion towards what they're doing, a passion for their brand and their product, but also for the guests that they're serving. They really want to give them or create an experience that's fantastic. And that takes a lot of hard work. And I think that, and especially through difficult economic times where you can feel sometimes, well, that reward's not really good enough for the amount of effort I'm putting into this. But you don't tend to think like that when you're that proud and that passionate about what you're doing. You just sort of push that away and you keep going, you keep working hard at it. And that's been the model for us and our family for a long, long time. But moving forward, we are now in a position where we're doing a couple of different things with our brand, and, you know, putting that IP to use for other institutions as well, or other businesses. So our model will be more about putting that layer of IP into places, adding the training, adding the menu consults and the menu knowledge and all of that sort of thing, and putting in really good venues into other people's businesses and providing that kind of IP and training that we've gathered over the many years of working in the restaurant business.
So that's really you're transforming from a producer of delivery into an IP company, where you're taking your knowledge, your expertise, and your ability to communicate into a business. And it's going to be in a very simple terms, powered by Grossi type of situation, where you take the lower. You'd like that idea? Yeah.
I'm loving the way you're describing it. That's what's making me laugh, because I don't think I could have articulated anywhere near as good as you, Richard.
So, but you change from front facing to underneath into the foundation. That's a very interesting transformation of your development. You know, still a young guy, right? Mm-hmm. So you've got a lot to go for. Plus, you've got the family behind you as well, which I think is also an extraordinary thing, that the family is, it's a total family outfit going here, with you being the front face. But this idea of that must also be an interesting dynamic in the brand change, to change from the name Grossi up on the front of the door, which it is still Grossi, to now that's going to go Florentino. So you could be, the engine behind other people, making other people more successful through your IP. So it's a very interesting transfer of brand relationship.
It is, but I feel that, and as a family, we feel, and you are right, we're a very close-knit family, and I've been very lucky in my career to have good family around me. Both my children work in the business now, my wife, my sister, and my brother-in-law. So that gives us a lot of strength, because we are a good, strong unit. But yes, we feel that, we have still a lot to offer. We just want to do it in a different way now. We just decided we'd turn down the volume a little bit on the pressures of that life, but we still have so much more to offer. So moving forward, that's what we'll be doing.
But the great thing about that is, which we always have a bit of a difficulty in this country, of putting value on knowledge. You've got the knowledge, experience, wouldn't you say, Roy? What we do, we're older guys. We have always that thing. Well, it's not transactional; it's value add. So what you're doing is value add, and I think to articulate it like the way you do, and I'm sure that's how the brand will evolve, Roy, as we know. That's going to be another exciting epoch, but also a reference to why having knowledge and experience is of value in today's world. That's what I thought for younger people to hear this, what you're talking about, who don't have that knowledge. This would be very inspirational for them.
I'd like to touch on also the idea of IP, and let's go bigger picture from an Australian perspective. I do a lot of work, particularly in Asia, different countries around Asia, and the respect that they have for Australian IP and knowledge. In Australia, we probably don't see how much in demand our knowledge is. So I kind of just sitting here thinking, my God, your skill, your IP is exportable.
I'd like to think so.
We can export as much iron ore as we can, but at the end, it's not going to last us forever.
There's only so much in the ground.
we've only got limited resource.
Yeah.
But the brain, the human brain, the family, what you've built, what would be your appetite for taking your whole business model internationally?
Absolutely. Look, we have. We're not new to it. We've done. We had a wonderful Trattoria Grossi in Bangkok for some time.
Yeah.
That was with the Intercontinental Hotel. That ran for about 8 or 9 years before they decided to change their direction with that. But it was very successful. And what I learned from that was a big learning curve, actually, because what I learned from that you can't necessarily be exactly the same as you are here. You have to make sure that you're adapt your methodology.
Think global, act local.
Perfectly said. And it's also how you interact with people of different cultures as well. And we found that you have to go through the chain of command there properly. You have to make sure that you're respecting everybody along the way, because it's very easy to lose face quite quickly if you're not going through those channels of respect within their cultural values. But it was very successful, and my appetite would be very, very strong for doing other things.
I noticed the way that Guy was looking at you there, Roy. That was sort of like that was an invitation to say, come in, spinner.
I did make a few hints this morning, and I think I know from working with some of the big groups, the international groups, particularly in Asia, which is going gangbusters. Interesting, totally unrelated to brand, but just figures that sort of pop into my head. You know that the Asian, let's call it the ASEAN region, is now the third biggest population concentration in the world. It's the third biggest market after China and India. And some people are saying, well, the EU, we all know about the EU, watch the AU, and we're on the border. And there's so much happening in Asia, and obviously there's so much Asian influence coming here, that we're no longer, the island that we thought we were. So maybe just comment also on the changes that you've seen around you. So you've been this anchor, this destination, iconic destination. How's Melbourne changed in terms of the food offer? Different cultures, different brands. What's happening in Melbourne right now that's really exciting?
Well, I think I've used this word before. Authenticity is something that Melbourne is very, very good at. And I think we have a lot of competition here when it comes to food and beverage and the food scene. What I'm finding is that we have very, very authentic restaurants. Like if you go to good Chinese restaurants, they are good Chinese restaurants. If you go to good Vietnamese restaurants, they're becoming really strong and really good. That sort of, old-fashioned kind of thing where you get a blend of all this different stuff in a menu, and people aren't looking for that anymore. People are looking for a really perfect, beautiful, authentic experience. And I think that there's so many different cooking styles in Melbourne. It's a melting pot of multicultural food and beverage. And we're getting great restaurants pop up, beautiful Turkish restaurants that are very authentic.
I mean, could that be said, Guy? I'm just thinking as you were talking, the way that competition and the size of the market, plus the need to be relevant, inventive. I mean, that's a great example for other businesses who, we hear all the time of people wanting to be, what was it like years ago? Actually, the restaurateurs are like every day is a new day. Every day you've got to tap into what the market's doing. So when you look at it, it is a great example of evolution and in some cases revolution to push people up in their mindset changes.
Absolutely. And I think with the coming of more and more competition, that's what gets people to up their game.
Yes,
I mean,
exactly.
It's that simple. You've just got to keep pushing the boundaries further and further to be able to stay relevant in the marketplace. And I think if you're not prepared to do that, then it's time to pick up your bat and ball.
I think it's a great example for the whole of the nation to look at these sort of things, because this is survival of the fittest, and also the people that can ability to reinvent and to be relevant all the time. It's a Darwinian theory, that you actually got to be. It's not the strongest or it's the one that's the one that invents itself to survive.
Well, you used an interesting word before we started speaking earlier on today. You said resilience, and I think that word is very relevant in our industry and probably all industries where you want to keep going and make sure you're the one at the top of your game. That word resilience is really relative to what we're talking about, because it's easy to do something great once, but to keep doing it year in, year out, is very hard to do, and that's where, the tough, are able to survive, and the ones that aren't as resilient, well, they just sort of
You
walk
also,
away.
in terms of your resilience, Guy, you've also had a view of expanding, so that
Yes.
you don't have all your interest in one place. You've multiplied it over, and you've attracted also other people as well through your offer and also your passion, but also your business. I mean, there's acumen here. It's not just cooking at the stove.
No. That's a tiny part of it. It's the part that I enjoy the most, where you get creative and you stand there with your produce and all of that. And we'll go back to produce in a minute, because it relates to something that Roy said before. But definitely there's a lot more to our business than just that creative, really fun stuff, which that is the fun stuff. Looking after a guest, getting them to laugh and smile, getting them to just enjoy being with you and eating your food and rolling their eyes and going, wow, mamma mia, that tastes fantastic. That's the fun bit. But all the other stuff, that's where it gets tricky, and that's where you've got to know. And I had the good fortune of starting in an industry at a very young age, and it was a more forgiving industry back then. So I got to learn a lot along the way. But I wouldn't recommend a young person go into the business without having good knowledge these days, because it's tougher now. It's a lot tougher than what it was.
And good support.
Good support, absolutely. What that be, financial or good family support, but definitely a good solicitor, a good accountant. You've got to have a good team of people around you that really understand business if you want to survive in the world of business today. It's very, very different.
So let's come back to produce.
Produce, yes, because you said that our IP is well sought after in the rest of the world, particularly places like Asia, but so is our produce. Australia is one of the countries that I believe people look at for clean, well-grown or well-raised, amazing produce, whether it be our food bowl growing beautiful veggies, and we're very lucky in Victoria, we've got fantastic stuff, but also our meat industry is strong. Look at some of the fish that come out of our waters, Fremantle octopus and beautiful scallops from Bass Strait and stuff like that. They're all very exportable items as well, and I know that a lot of export happens, and they're an amazing asset, I think, that we have in this country.
No, I was just going to say, I totally can back that up, Guy, because the work that we do in Asia, people are constantly asking me, can you please introduce us to suppliers, to producers in Australia?
Well, again, that's where I can help, Roy.
Yeah, and it just occurs to me that, you are the total package, because having the IP and the family background and the recipe book, that ain't all. If you don't have the produce, so
that's the first thing, Roy. You've got to have the produce.
Now, Roy, when we have these presentations, we always want to support the guest, don't we?
No, of course we do.
Give the guest an opportunity to build the business, build their brand.
But we're also trying to do something. I think Australia's got a little bit of a decision to make about what kind of country we want to be, without waxing too sort of political on it. But at the end, we don't really know. We're probably such a small place that we don't really appreciate how strong we are. And if we suddenly see how other people, just for a moment, ask other people how they view us, and it's quite different than what we might expect. And again, not that you would do everything for them, but just that element of, in your model, if you can bring the total package, which is everything to do with the IP and how to run the food business, but actually the produce as well, because if you just leave them, and we see this all over the place, where some consultant comes in, does a PowerPoint and says, "See you later. Give me the money. It's your problem."
Yeah, well,
you can't do that.
I don't think you can work like that. And I've known Richard for many, many years. Apparently, I've known you for some years too, but we kind of haven't really
You're a busy
connected
man.
as much. But I think you'll back me up. You can't just say, here's the presentation and walk away from it. If it's your work, you've got to stand behind it, be proud of it, especially if you're putting one of our brands on the door. Example, my restaurant in Perth, Garum, which is a Roman-inspired restaurant because of the building that it's in and so forth. But we don't just say, here are the recipes and walk away. A couple of weeks ago, I was there. I had my week there, and I go there regularly. I have a great relationship with the chef there, Paolo, who's a young Neapolitan boy, and I talk to them on a weekly basis about what's going on there. I see their service reports come through every night of the week. If there's a problem I notice on the service reports, I'm on the phone to them. And it's a real, it's a live kind of connection there. You can't just put a name up on a front door, give a package of recipes and say, see you later, and not stand behind your own product.
I think picking up on your point there, though, too, Roy, and what you've just said there, Guy, you've got to have an international view of this, a best practice view. I think Australians need to recognise that the people like yourselves in your business have an international best. You compare yourself with the best. I think that's a really fantastic thing that you do, and that raises the expectation of the customer, but also the expectations of yourself. And so what you're doing now, your next stage is to take, as you were mentioning, Roy, your international thinking and quality, but taking it to the world. Exporting our expertise from Australia, I think, is one of the most value adds we could do.
Come back to the audience. So we think our audience is mostly businesses, young entrepreneurs, startups. We're not preaching to ad agencies and branding agencies. You know, we're actually bringing useful information and lessons, I suppose. So let's picture somebody that, I don't know, 25-year-old, going to start somewhere, got the passion that you had back in the day, and they say, right, what are the steps? Where do I start? Do I do a logo first? Do I have an interior designer come in and do amazing decor? Do I do the kitchen first? Do I come up with the concept, the menu? What would your advice be to somebody that wants to do what you've done? What are the steps?
I definitely think when it comes down to putting together the brand that you want to push forward with, the concept is one of the most important things. There's no point in having a fancy logo if you don't have a concept that is behind that, and it needs to be strong, it needs to be concise, it needs to be able to speak for itself. So whatever that concept might be, whether you're doing something that's regionally based or if it's a particular country that you're trying to do, you need to know your stuff. You need to have researched that well. And Richard mentioned before, comparing yourself to the rest of the world. It's actually so easy now with the communications we have to be able to get eyes on what everybody's doing in the rest of the world. So it is pretty easy to compare yourself and to make sure that your concept is really strong and really sound. And then from there, I think you can build all the building blocks around it that you need. Again, we've got the business acronym side. We've talked about that. But then you can build your model of how your restaurant is going to unfold.
Or your business.
Whatever it is.
And with a story.
Yeah, it has to have the story. The story has to be real. It has to be authentic. And I mention that a lot because I believe it's true. If you've got something you believe in, if you've got a bottle of olive oil that you know those olives grew in South Australia and in the McLaren Vale, you know the people that pressed it, the family is good and sound. Diana is the ones that make our olive oil, but you've been to it, you've seen the trees, you know the family does a great job of what they do. You can pick up that bottle of oil and you can sell that story. You can sell it.
That would be the same even if you're running a bicycle shop, for example. Where's everything come from?
Absolutely. Who made it? Yeah. Who put that gear mechanism together? Yeah. Is it this brand or is it this brand? And why is this brand better than that brand? Imagine if you walked into a car dealership and you started asking the salesperson questions about the car and they didn't know how to answer those questions. You would not feel comfortable buying a car from that person. And you wouldn't appreciate the brand either. But when the person can tell you about that car and the intricacies of it and why it's so good, you appreciate that brand so much more. And it's the same, I believe, for any business. I know restaurant businesses, so I always bring it back to that. But definitely concept first, the building blocks go in later.
And also on that, Guy, to understand the pain point that you are solving. It could be the pain point that you're just hungry. It could be the pain point that you're looking for a bite. What is it that is the motivator about why would you do the business with this person, with this company? So understanding that whole circle of where your customer's headspace is incredibly important.
I agree.
Another dimension, just to dwell on for a bit. So you're not a retailer in the sense of being, let's say, a fashion retailer, but we know how retail has been totally disrupted. The idea of having a store and people will come, you don't have that anymore. In your industry, the destination is still a restaurant, but my observation is that good food is popping up in all sorts of places. So maybe just explain a little bit more about some of the work that you're doing. I know you've mentioned hotels, but actually running a restaurant and paying the rent and paying the bills and whatever is a hell of a tough gig. Where can we expect to see good food popping up? Is it in sporting stadiums, airports? I mean, where can we take this market to other than just having the iconic restaurant?
Well, definitely, I think there's always going to be a place for the restaurant proper because it is what it is. Now, there's all sorts of different ways of doing that as well. And probably, an entrepreneur would say, okay, well, I'm going to go into this building, but, maybe I can get offered a really good deal in this building if I bring my brand into it. And that is happening more and more often than not. And developers are going, okay, well, let's have some really good retail down the bottom, but we'll make it so that they can survive in that retail space, so that they can put in a really good flagship restaurant there, and then I'll be able to sell my apartments for more money up the top. That I'm just giving an example of what might happen. So in that case, it takes a bit of that pain out of the setup costs and so forth of that particular space. We're definitely seeing a shift where sporting stadiums are deciding, wow, we need to up our ante on what the offer is for our people coming to watch sporting events, because it's people are wanting better than just whatever it is that you could have got traditionally, but now they're wanting something with more of a brand behind it, something that they know is going to be reliable. And we're definitely seeing that happen in airports as well. You've mentioned airports, you've mentioned sporting stadiums. We're definitely seeing a change around the world in the food offer in airports and so forth as well. So I think, anywhere where you've got people, a congregation of people, you can expect to see a more refined food offering pop up.
On that, it's also about the quality as opposed to the cost, isn't it? Because,
correct, yes.
It's so expensive now to go anywhere, those events and things, and then putting on top a quality product that you would serve, but also the cost that comes with that. That's a value add that has to be explained and actually delivered and articulated.
Absolutely.
Just the idea of Melbourne is the food capital, but it's also the sporting capital. Those two things very powerful when you think of them together. I mean, people come to Formula One; they're not exactly the poorest people in the city. I mean, you have an international audience there. The idea of a Ferrari buzzing around a track and people eating Italian food. I mean, there's got to be something in that.
Well, we've done many events at the Formula One. I think we've probably done it about 8 years in a row.
Wow.
Before that famous shutdown, when that happened. We were actually there on track that day, and our gig was in the Ferrari suite. So we would do a menu for the 4 days: Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And people that were dining in that suite were basically Ferrari owners.
That goes against with your brand values. I mean, Kia is a fantastic brand, but it wouldn't really probably suit you to be with the Kia brand. So you've got to keep your values correctly. You're an Italian.
Yeah, has to be Ferrari.
No choice.
That's truly international thinking.
We had some wonderful events there and a lot of fun. And we got to meet some really interesting characters as well. So definitely events like that will always have a good food offering because the people that are coming expect it. They're just expecting, and they're paying a lot of money to be in those suites as well. And that, so let's not forget that. You know, things like the Australian Open. Look at events like that. What an iconic event that is for Melbourne, and the food offering there is just getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And we've done a couple of events for the Australian Open over the years as well.
But the way you guys are talking, Roy, still comes back to me, the imagination of taking what you can do and not necessarily having your name on it. You're just part of that thing, elevating, being
absolutely.
Connected. And so it's such, and the global IP you've got is so easily to export. You've only got to find the right contact, as you mentioned in Bangkok, to then deliver. And it's not necessarily being in the kitchen. It's actually it's the infrastructure around it that's actually important.
Yep.
Well, just talking to the audience for a sec, we're on YouTube in addition to being on the podcast channels, Guy, and I can see that you've still got one heap of passion there because you've done most of the talking with your hands, like a good Italian, a good chef,
it happens.
like a good food expert.
Tie my hands up and we won't be having a conversation.
There's one more, the key question from Richard, which we always finish on, but I just wanted to compliment you on your energy.
Oh, you're too kind, Ruth, really.
You've been working from a young age in one of the toughest industries. You're still going, and you've made a remarkable success of it. The family has been amazing for Melbourne, for Australia, I guess, and you've clearly still got a whole lot of energy because watch the next 10 years.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a turn of a page. The new chapter is starting.
Yeah.
And as we were talking a bit earlier, I plan on taking a little bit of rest, but not for a long period of time because, thank you for mentioning, I'm very young. I'm just turned 60 this year. But we've got a lot left in us and I've got a lot left to give to this industry.
I think the great thing about it is that you potentially have taken the effort required to physically run something. You've move to the next dimension now of taking ideas, knowledge, and as Roy says, your passion into a different dynamic.
Yeah.
And I see the whole thing as exporting it, whether it's exporting it down the street in Melbourne or exporting it across the world. That's the most fantastic brand story.
Thank you,
So
Richard.
at the age of 60, Richard's question now is going to take you back a little bit. This is always the final question in our podcast.
Yeah.
The Richard question.
Well, I always think, as being my mature years myself, is what would you whisper in the ear of your younger self from what you know today to guide that person on their journey forward?
I would say chill for a minute, get to learn a lot more before you take that leap. Make sure you know your stuff. Do a bit of travel and get some really good ideas under your belt. And then by all means, once you've got a good team around you, take that leap, because without good young people carrying on in this industry, we will not have an industry to speak of. So I encourage it wholeheartedly, but just be aware of all the things, all the obstacles that you are going to come up against. Because as I said earlier on in the program, I think I was lucky enough, fortunate enough to be able to learn it as I went along. And there'll be an element of that for sure. But I think, young guy, learn a bit more before you start.
Great.
That's a great way to finish. All I can say is, from my perspective and Richard's, thanks so much for being a guest with us today.
Absolute privilege.
We can't wait, well, certainly I can't wait to have a meal in a restaurant that you're going to design for somebody and create the concept for when you get back from your sabbatical.
You'll be there on opening night, my friend, with me.
I reckon the other thing I'd like to say is that it's been really like sitting around the table with conversation as our food for thought.
The only thing missing was the vino, but it's a bit too early in the day for that.
Well, thanks.
We have to look after reputation here, guys.
True.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, audience, to you guys for listening and watching. You've been on BRANDR.